Welcome to Table for One. I'm the narrator, and in today's video, I'll be doing a rules refresher for Anachrony. And this one in particular is about the Doomsday Module found in the Classic expansion. Let's get rolling. Alright, so I am set up now to teach you how to play with the Doomsday module of Anachrony, and this comes in the Classic expansion pack, so it does not come in the base game. If you want to play this, you do have to grab the Classic expansion pack, which also includes the Pioneers of New Earth and Guardians of the Council modules. But don't forget, I have chapter markers, so you can jump around to the spot that you're looking for if you've got a specific question. And of course, if you have a question that you can't find the answer to in this video, go ahead and leave a comment, and I'll do my best to help you out. But the format I'm going to use for these Anachrony rules refreshers going forward, now that we're into the main bigger modules, is I'll start with a brief overview of what it is the module does. I'll let you know what other modules it is or isn't compatible with, because they cannot all be used together. I'll tell you what setup changes there are for the game. Then I'll go into the details about how the actual mechanics of the new module work. And then I'll tell you how it integrates with solo specifically. So if you're looking for the solo portion, that'll be towards the end. And then I'll just kind of wrap it all up. So let's start with the overview, and this will be brief. But in a nutshell, the Doomsday module introduces this sideboard with a new action called the experiment action. And what this allows you to do is take this impact marker on the timeline and move it forward or backward, or even eliminate it entirely so that there is no impact. So that can have some drastic impacts, pardon the pun, on how your game of Anachrony plays out. So now let's talk about compatibility. If you want to play this solo, it is compatible with the Chronosis, but not with the Chronobot. Most of the modules are not compatible with Chronobot, but they are all compatible with Chronosis. So that'll be a common theme on the solo side. And then the Doomsday module is not compatible with the main module of the Fractures of Time expansion. So the main module is the one that introduces, flux cores and the blinking mechanism. You cannot use the Doomsday module with that. It's not supported. I did mention the main module because Fractures of Time also includes the much smaller Variable Anomalies module, and that is compatible with everything. You can use Variable Anomalies with Doomsday, and I will in fact do so in my solo playthrough. But the main reasons it's not compatible are Fractures of Time, you have a shorter timeline, right? You've got 3 eras before the impact and 2 after instead of 4 and 3. So with that shorter timeline, moving this impact forward or back is drastically more, now the word's just stuck in my head, impactful, and I think it's to the point of being game-breaking. The other thing is that this board here, this modular board for the Doomsday module, includes specific info for the 4 base game paths, so Dominance, Harmony, Salvation, and Progress. And the Fractures of Time module introduces the Path of Unity, and so that is not anywhere on here. So the Path of Unity wouldn't be able to play with this module either. So those are the main reasons that it's not compatible with Doomsday. Now, if you would like to house rule it and play with Doomsday and Fractures of Time at the same time, first you should know that the rules police will come after you, and if they ask me, I'm going to say I don't know you. I'm not going back to rules jail, not again. But those caveats aside, what I would say is this sideboard is actually very specifically called out in the Classic expansion rulebook as being treated as part of the main board, whereas the other sideboards introduced in that expansion are not labeled that way. So as far as blinking is concerned, I would say you can blink away from this pool hex space here on this board. I would treat it as part of the main board, same as the evacuate board. And then if you were playing with the Path of Unity, I would just select whichever path is not being used, and if there's more than one, try and evenly distribute which way you're going. If it's a 2-player game, pick one on the other side. If it's a 4-player game, you're only going to have one option. If it's a 3-player game, just randomize I'm going to play Path as Unity, but treat it as if I'm Path of Salvation for this track. You could conceivably do that. And then as you'll see in a minute, we put these experiment cards beneath the different eras of the timeline. And I guess I would put a level 1 experiment at the start of the game beneath era 0, just like you would put a super project above it. But all that being said, again, officially not compatible, not recommended. Okay, so let's talk about how to set up to play with the Doomsday module. First, you're going to need this board, which again is treated as part of the main board. So just place it next to the main board. And it's got a couple things on it. It's got 2 tokens here that start right here in the middle. These are 2 trackers. This one is the Save Earth tracker, and this one is the Seal Fate tracker. So depending on which path you're playing as, you're either trying to save Earth or seal its fate. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few minutes. And then there's also these 2 trajectory dice that go on these spaces here. So the dice are identical. Each one of them has 2 minuses, red minuses on opposite sides, 2 blue pluses on opposite sides, and then 2 blank faces, again, on opposite sides. So each die has a 1 in 3 chance of rolling a plus, a minus, or a blank. Then you're going to need these level 1 and level 2 experiment cards. Now, the classic expansion comes with 10 level 1s and 10 level 2s, and I picked up at some point some sort of expansion to the expansion, some sort of bonus pack or something. So I've got 30 of these level 2s. I got another 20 of them somewhere. So at the start of the game, you take the level 2 experiment cards, you just shuffle them face down, and you put them somewhere accessible, probably close to the timeline rather than close to this board. And then the level 1 experiments, you shuffle these up. You're going to have 10 of these, again, in a standard game, and all the game modules that Doomsday is compatible with. You're going to have 7 timeline tiles. So you're going to place one of these level 1 experiments beneath each timeline tile, sort of opposite of the super projects, which go above. I'm not setting up the super projects right now, but so I've got 7 of them out there. There's 3 more. You don't look at these 3 and you place them back in the game box. So you won't use them all every game. And then just like the super projects, you're going to take the first one and flip it face up. Let's leave a little room for path markers or focus markers. So we'll say I'm playing as a path of dominance. I'll just put my focus marker there. And then when you are shuffling together the endgame condition cards, there is one for the Doomsday module. It is the most experiments. Whoever has the most experience or experiments gets 3 victory points at the end of the game. So you could take this one and shuffle it in. And if you are playing solo during setup, there's one of these for the Chronosis as well. So you can go ahead and shuffle that in. I'll talk more about solo again in its own section towards the end, but there is one of these endgame scoring condition cards for Chronosis for the Doomsday module. And then also for solo setup, again, you're going to need for Chronosis, the C07 tile and the C08 tile. These both have the icon of the experiment action on it. And then if you're not combining with anything else, you grab this C03 module or action tile that you would use as if you had no modules. So you still use C03. So 7, 8, and 3 is what you're going to need, and we'll talk more about solo at the end. So now let's get into the details of how this works, the real nuts and bolts of this module. And there's 3 phases we need to talk about: the preparation phase, the action phase, and then the cleanup phase. So in the preparation phase, so say we're going into the first era, this is our sort of setup condition. We would then, during preparation of era 1, we would flip over the super project of the next era so we could see it. At the same time, we would do the same thing with the next level 1 experiment beneath the timeline. So these are going to flip over the exact same way that super projects do. But there is an important difference. So during the game, just like you can claim super projects and put them on your player board, you can claim experiment cards. So let's say that during the first era, somebody claims this experiment and they just put it beside their player mat or in their play area. When we get to the preparation phase for era 2, not only do we flip over this next level 1 experiment, but any gaps that are left behind, we now backfill with a level 2 experiment. And we will do this until you run out of the deck. And if that were to happen, you never shuffle any old cards back in. You don't make a new deck. At that point, you would just run out. And that's because each of these experiment cards that you gain is worth victory points. And so you want to be able to hold on to them to remember how many points you have. So all the level 1 experiments are worth 2 victory points, and all the level 2 experiments are worth 3 victory points. And you can see that in the top right corner. But just to recap, in the preparation phase, you just flip over the next level 1 experiment for the next era in the future, and then you backfill any empty spots with a level 2 experiment from the stack. That's all you need to do for the preparation phase. So now let's talk about the action phase, and this is where most of the action is going to be. So as you can see, this board introduces a new hex pool spot. So that means any number of mechs can be there, or exosuits, I should say. It has unlimited availability. And so you can take this action with any worker type. You've got the scientist, the engineer, and the administrator. And there is no bonus or benefit to using any one of them. So it's just all equal. And then, of course, you could send a genius there as well. And again, don't tell the rules police, but you could presumably, if you wanted to house rule some way to play with fractures of time, I don't see why you couldn't send an operator there too. We're not going to worry about that right now. So you can send a worker to that space. Now, when you do, you can gain the experiment wherever your focus marker is. So for whatever era your focus marker is. So if you are using a power plant and time traveling, if you move your focus marker back, that would be the experiment that you could take. So let's find out how we take an experiment. There's a couple pieces of information on each of these cards, and it's pretty straightforward. So again, the victory point value is in the top right corner, but again, that'll always be 3 victory points for a level 2 experiment, 2 victory points for a level 1. And then there are 2 critical pieces of information here on the bottom of the card. On the left, there's going to be a little green check mark. This is a criteria. And then on the right, this is the cost. So for example, we'll just look at these 3 cards. This one here, the criteria is you must have 3 gold and 3 administrators. And then in order to take the experiment, you must pay 1 gold and 1 administrator. And of course, this experiment must be in the same era as your focus marker as well. This level 1 experiment here, in order to take it, you must have a lab and a life support, and then you pay 2 water. And then this one, you must have a breakthrough that has the military icon on it, and then you must pay 1 standard resource, either a titanium, gold, or uranium. And so some of these cards you'll see, various breakthrough with a particular icon on it. And so that just gives sort of another purpose to the breakthroughs besides super projects, because I think that was a little bit of a critique of the base game by itself, like there wasn't enough use for the super projects, or I'm sorry, for the breakthroughs rather. And so you'll see that in many of these modules, more things you can do with the breakthroughs, and Doomsday is no exception, with many of the criteria being specific breakthroughs. So to recap what we've said so far, take any worker, put them in an exosuit, send them to this hex pool, and then you check where your focus marker is. And for that experiment, if you meet the criteria, you can pay the cost and take the card, and you just put it by your player area, and then it's worth the indicated number of victory points at the end of the game. And then recall that, if you take this one, then there's an empty spot. At the preparation phase of the next era, that's when we'll backfill it with another experiment, but from the level 2 experiment deck. So then if you've successfully taken an experiment, you then do this other action, and that's going to depend on which path you're playing as. So if you are playing as the path of harmony or the path of dominance, you are on the side of save Earth. So you may, if you've completed an experiment, you may choose to move your marker up 1 space on the appropriate track. So I've got the dominance focus marker here. So let's just say for right now that I'm playing as path of dominance and I've taken an experiment, so I move up this track. When I move up, since I land on this space and I am the path of dominance, I gain 1 victory point. So I also take 1 victory point token. And then you can see as I continue to advance up this track, the path of dominance gets another victory point, the next time another victory point, and then the next time 2 victory points. Now, moving up this same track is also the path of harmony. So let's say for a moment that I'm playing as the path of harmony and I take an experiment and I move this up. I do not get any bonus, but neither does the path of dominance player. They don't get a bonus either. You only get the bonus that's in your sort of path line if you are the one who moves the token up. So you can see this space here is 2 victory points for dominance and 2 victory points for the path of harmony. So if I'm playing as dominance again, I move it up to here, I get 2 victory points, path of harmony does not. So whichever path you're playing as, again, we'll say I'm playing as dominance, I might want to move up these first spaces so that I get the victory points, but I may want to push the track further just to deny this player the victory points. And so that is the save Earth side. Now, if you're playing as progress or the path of salvation, you're on the seal fate track and you are moving the token down this way. Now, the victory points work the same way. Again, you only get victory points if you are the one who then moves your track into that position. and it just moves one space at a time. So I'll try and recap that in the most succinct way that I possibly can. After you successfully gain an experiment card by going to this hex, you may move the appropriate track marker for your path. You may not move the other path's marker. You can't like move it backwards, so you can't touch the other path's track marker, only your own. So you may choose to move it forward one space on its track, and then you and only you gain victory points that are indicated on your own Doomsday track. Now, the last thing to note is you cannot move either of these tokens at all if the impact has already happened, or if either token has made it all the way to one end of its track. So if either token gets to the end, no more tokens may be moved, or if we've already had the impact, no more track markers may be moved. Now, if we're after impact, say, or if you meet any of those conditions, you can still take this experiment action. You can still go to this hex and get experiments for the victory points, but you can just no longer move these tracks. And then if it wasn't clear, if you get all the way up on this track, then Earth is saved. If you get all the way down on this track, then Earth's fate is sealed. So now let's talk about the cleanup phase, because that is going to help make this track make a little bit more sense beyond the victory points. So when you're playing the Doomsday Module, the first step of the cleanup phase is to retrieve your workers. So you do that as normal. There is no change. Retrieve all your workers first. And then the next step is to check for impact. Now, normally that just means, are you in this era where it's time for impact? But that is not necessarily the case now, so let's move back an era. Now, when we check for impact, we're going to roll these two trajectory dice. One time, just one player rolls them. What do we have? A plus and a minus, so they cancel each other out. Let's say we got more pluses than minuses. At this point, we would take this impact tile and move it one space forward. And we would move any appropriate experiments and super projects at the same time. Now, as you may have guessed, if we had more minuses than pluses, we would move the impact tile backwards. Again, moving any experiments or super projects as necessary. So that may mean that the impact is now. And then, finally, if we have a tie, like the first time I rolled, that means the impact marker just stays right where it is. It doesn't go forwards or backwards. Now, one other thing I should note, let's say we are here and now we're checking for impact. So we roll and we get, say, two pluses or a plus and a minus, right? We have more pluses than minuses. Then the impact moves away and it's not time for impact, right? If we have more minuses, the impact cannot go further back than the current era. So we would just leave it where it is and it's still impact time. And then after you roll, you also take a look at where these markers are on the tracks. So you add in wherever the marker is, whatever symbols you have there. So when you get to this spot, you add a plus. And then you still have one additional plus. When you get here, you have two additional pluses. Likewise, when you get to this first spot, you have a minus, another minus, and then these are not additive. It's just you add a minus, you add a single minus, or you add two minuses to whatever the dice roll is, right? So here's a plus and a blank with two more pluses. So that's three pluses and two minuses. That's total more pluses. So we would move the impact forward this way in the timeline. Now, let's say we've gotten one of these tracks all the way to the end. If we get the Seal Fate track all the way to the end, it doesn't matter what era we're in and we don't bother to roll the dice. The impact is happening now, regardless. So no matter what, it's impact after the era when this track reaches its end. On the other side, let's say we get the Save Earth track all the way to the end. That means something very different. That means there will not be an impact at all. And that also means that whatever era we're in when we get this track all the way to the top is the last era for the game. So then during cleanup, you would just proceed directly to end game scoring. Now this can be tricky because that means because we never get past the impact, there is no opportunity for evacuation actions. So you've really got to plan your scoring around that. So just huge effect on the game either way. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. Now, there is an optional variant called Planned Experiments that you can choose to play with if you want to. And so if you want to play the Planned Experiments variant, you take this stack of level 2 experiments, and instead of having it face down, you have it face up. So everybody can see the next one that's going to be coming up, and then presumably, plan around whatever the criteria and costs are. And the other component of the planned experiments variant is whenever an experiment is completed, instead of waiting until the preparation phase, you just immediately replace it with the next level 2 experiment in the stack. So then, of course, when you are in the preparation phase, there should be no need to replenish any experiments because it should always be full. So let's now switch gears to talk about the solo mode, what you need to know for playing the Chronosis with the Doomsday Module. And since we're here, I'll say first that it is recommended you start by playing with planned experiments, presumably because you can plan for the next experiment and the Chronosis doesn't really get any benefit from that, so it makes it a little bit easier to start with. Now again, as I mentioned, when you're setting up for solo, there is this experiments endgame condition card, so you can add this in with Chronosis and shuffle it in with the others. So you would get 1 victory point at the end if you've got 4 completed experiments, 2 victory points for 7 completed experiments, and 4 victory points for 10 completed experiments. And then next, I'm just going to take up the space here with Chronosis. You will need 2 new action tiles, C07 and C08. C03 goes on its normal spot here, but C07 goes on the 1 spot, C08 goes on the 2 spot. And I should call out, the A sides are the standard side, but they're the easier side. If you want to up the difficulty, you can flip them over to the B sides, and maybe I'll talk about that after I've talked about what these do. But the A side is really going to be an experiment action for number 7, and then the B side is an experiment action and gain a power core. And for action tile 8, similar. On the front, it's an experiment action, and on the back, it's experiment plus gain 1 victory point and gain a power core. So you can play at the B-sides to up the difficulty as well. But of course, you're going to be playing as one of the paths, and the Chronosis will always be on the opposite track as you. They will always oppose you on these tracks, which kind of makes sense. So if you're playing as Dominance or Harmony, they're going to be trying to seal Earth's fate. And if you're playing as Salvation or Progress, they're going to be trying to save Earth. And quick thematic aside, it's not that these paths are necessarily good and these are evil, but each path is trying to figure out, will the impact have a more beneficial or more negative effect on their own path's ability to lead in the new world. So these paths feel they would do better without the impact. These 2 paths feel that if the impact happened, they would come out stronger. So don't think that they're like the good guys and they're the bad guys. Everybody's just looking out for themselves. But anyway, the important point is whichever path you are, Chronosis will be on the opposite track. So when Chronosis needs to take one of these 2 tiles actions, and I'll talk about what the difference between the 2 tiles is after we've talked about what the heck it is these tiles are doing. But when they need to take one of these actions, there's 2 steps. And you complete both steps. You need to do them in order. And if one step cannot be taken, then you skip it and you still do the next step. So step 1 is execute an experiment, meaning Chronosis will take an experiment with its path marker on it. Now, a path marker, those are these things. The Chronosis comes with 4 of them, so you're going to need the 4 of these. The Chronosis will take an experiment with a path marker on it. If there are none, then skip this step. We'll talk more about step 1 in a minute, but step 2 is helpful. So go to step 2 next. So step 2 is prepare for experimentation. And that means Chronosis is going to place a path marker on a face-up experiment, either in the present or in the past, but not in the future. So I'll leave my my path marker here. So we'll say that we're in era 3. So this one would be flipped over. So it's going to Chronosis will put its path marker on an experiment that's face up in the present or past, and it has to be an experiment that does not already have its path marker on it. Now, your focus marker has no effect on this. Just ignore it. Just look at only Chronosis's path markers. So right now, these 3 experiments would be available because they're in the present or past, and none of them have Chronosis's path marker on it. So let's see how we break the ties. First, it's going to prefer a level 1 experiment over a level 2 experiment. So in this particular scenario, we've got 2 level 2s and a level 1, so it's going to put a path marker right there on that one. Now let's say that one we're already there and we need to place another path marker. Again, it's got to be in the present or past era, and it has to be a experiment without a path marker already on it. So this one, even though it's a level 1, is no longer available. So one of these 2. So in this case, it will pick the furthest back in the timeline. So it would put its next path marker on this one here. So now that we've got some path markers on there, let's say we get back around to one of these experiments again. So this tile here is take a level 1 experiment. This tile is take a level 2 experiment. So if we were executing this action, then step 1 would be for Chronosis to take an experiment that would be a level 1 that already has its path marker on it. Now to do this, it would need to place an exosuit in this hex pool here. If it doesn't have any exosuits, then it wouldn't be able to take the action. So we're going to say we're taking this action, take a level 1 experiment. Chronosis places its exosuit in this hex pool, and then it takes a level 1 experiment that already has its path marker on it. Again, if there are none that fit the criteria, then you skip this step, you go to step 2 where you then place another path marker. Now, if there are multiple, again, it would take the one furthest back in the timeline. So if we'll just pretend there's another era back here. If this were the case, we're trying to take a level 1 experiment. There are 2 of them that both have a path marker on it. So it's going to take the furthest one back. Now, when it does that, the path marker that was on that card disappears. Just put this by the Chronosis board. It'll be worth the victory points at the end of the game. And then, presuming Chronosis successfully took an experiment card, then whichever side of the board you're on, so again, say I'm moving this one here, Chronosis moves the opposite side 1 space. And then it gains any victory points listed regardless of the path. So it would get, let's say we're moving up on this track, it would get 1, it would get 1, it would get 1, and here it would get 4 because there's 2 on this side and 2 on this side, and then here it would get 3. Same thing on the other side, we go down, Chronosis gets 1 victory point, 1 victory point, 4 victory points, and 2 victory points. Again, same rules apply. If we're after the impact, or if one of these tracks has already reached the end, then no more tracks can be moved. That rule is unchanged. Now let's go like this for a minute. Let's say this is how it looks, and I time travel back to this era, and then I take the experiment action right now, and I gain this experiment, which has Chronosis's path marker on it. I still get the experiment. This path marker moves forward 1 era to the next era that is either in the present or past that doesn't have a path marker on it. So if we're in era 3 right now, I could not, now let's say it looked like this. If I take this experiment, it can't go here, there's already a path marker, and it can't go here, that's in the future. And then, one more example, let's say it looks like this. Again, we move it forward, can't go there, there's already a marker, can't go there, that's in the future, and we don't look at the past. So if there's nowhere else for it to go, in that case, you just discard that token, it's off to the side. You still gain the experiment. Now, as I mentioned, the rulebook recommends that you start with the planned experiments variant, and then if you want to up the difficulty, do not play planned experiments. So you can't see what's coming ahead and you're not immediately backfilling the experiments. If you want to up the difficulty again, you can flip these tiles over. So this is the take a level 1 experiment and gain an energy core. And then this one would be take a level 2 experiment and gain an energy core and a victory point. And then lastly, if you still want to make it more difficult, the rulebook suggests during setup, just pretend these are all 1s, right? I won't make you pretend. So we're about to start the game, we're setting up, and the game suggests if this is still too easy, you can take 1 or more of these path markers and put them on future experiments. And Chronosis is not able to take them until they're at least in the present era, but they've already got a path marker on them. So there you go. I think that's what you need to know for the Doomsday module for Anachrony. So if anything was unclear, let me know in the comments. I'll try and clear it up. But my intent is also to now play a solo playthrough of Anachrony featuring this module, and I'm going to do my best to do lots of experiments and really focus on it just to kind of show it off. So if you'd like to see that, I'll put a link at the end of this video. But if you find these Anachrony rules refresher videos helpful or interesting, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and leave a like so that I know. And then I'll keep making more of this content. And then I intend to go through all of the Anachrony modules, so keep an eye out. I'll go through the classic expansion, and after I'm done with that, I'll work my way through Future Imperfect, and then I'll end with Fractures of Time, because that's the big one. And just a quick shout out as well. I know I've got multiple people who actually officially worked on Anachrony watching some of these videos, so that's pretty exciting, and I'm hoping that they will help keep me in check in case I make any errors. But I feel pretty confident about it. So anyway, that is the Doomsday module. And if you want to see it in action, I'm about to play it. Otherwise, I hope you have an awesome week. Thank you for watching Table for One, and I'll see you in the next video.